coming and during kind of a holiday season, so we appreciate it. And Sanjay said we're going to keep it short, but impactful. So welcome to the Hive think tank. And first, I want to thank SAP, and maybe Abdul, you want to say a few words of welcome?
Yeah, I guess I'm playing two roles today. One as a host of welcoming you to the event. It's always a pleasure to host you all, to exchange ideas, learn more about. I was asking somebody, should I give a background about SAP? You know how in an airplane they always teach you on how to put the seatbelts on because there is always a first flyer. But I'm assuming you are familiar with SAP and what we do, and we're known as a business process company, if you will. And the topic is apt for us to host you all today. And we're privileged and pleasure. And thank you for all the panelists as well, Sanjay, Naveen, and Praniti, for joining us today.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, Abdul. So welcome. So we host the Hive think tank. It's a thought leadership forum, on topics related to data, entrepreneurship, and a variety of different areas. We have physically touched more than 11,000 people. We do these events every other week. And so I'd like to thank our sponsors, especially SAP, for helping do these events. We do this across a set of kind of tracks, and so today's track, I guess, would be around the cognitive enterprise. And the way we see it is digital transformation is a big theme. There's a lot of earnings that just recently came out. Common theme across many of these companies was around digital transformation. And I think today's topic is a lot about that. The Hive itself is a fund, and what's unique about the Hive is we collaborate with entrepreneurs to help them start companies, are very operational for the first 15, 18 months. The other aspect of the Hive is that we are trying to leverage data and data-related techniques to drive disruption and new opportunities. Around workflow and business processes, around digital risk, which is security, privacy, Industry 4.0, which is a big space. Many of you came to an event we did here about a month back on Industry 4.0. Ambient intelligence is sort of our way of saying all things edge and being able to surface experiences, and of course, talent. We've got a number of companies that we have done, and if you are going to tweet today, please use the hashtag HiveData. So with that, I'd like to introduce Sanjay from Genpact. Sanjay is SVP and Chief Digital Officer, and is going to be the moderator of today's event.
Great, thank you. Thanks for having us. I think I've got my And without much further ado, I'm going to bring up our panelists as I kind of set the framing up for today. Please come on up. We'll introduce them in a minute. We'll go over sort of who we are. And actually, what I'd like to just set up front is I think we've got about an hour from what Ravi tells us. I want to spend some of that time sort of speaking with this panel of folks, but I actually want to draw you in as much as possible. And when I do it, if you have a thought, I'd love for you to just throw your hands up, introduce yourself, your company, and your affiliation, and then give us a question or contribute to the discussion. We'll keep it pretty live. I thought it might be worthwhile just to do a quick round of introductions. Just quickly, my name is Sanjay Srivastava. I work for a company called Genpact, and for those of you that haven't come across us, we're a digital transformation company. We're about 90,000 employees across some 30, 40 countries around the world. We help Fortune 500 companies take existing business processes and transform that using digital capabilities. At any point in time, we have about a few hundred engagements going on, and they stretch from artificial intelligence to deep analytics and data science projects to automation projects to what we call digital experience, which is an experience-based approach to actually reinventing your business processes, and I'm sure we'll get into all of that. And I've always lived and worked in the Silicon Valley. Before I was at Genpact, I was a startup entrepreneur, and actually before that I did 4 startups in a row, and all of them were acquired by great companies, so I'm fortunate to have sort of lived through some of that. But now, most of my time is spent actually dealing with some really tough problems. So very large companies are trying to change their book of business into the new, and so the area of business process transformation is really, really relevant to us. It's the core of what we do. So that's my background, and Abdul, you said a little bit about SAP, but perhaps you can just introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Sanjay. I'm Abdul Razack. I'm the Chief Product Officer in SAP's cloud business, which is primarily all the acquisitions that we have made over the last 10 years or so. And we also have some organic assets in there. SAP, for those of you who don't know SAP, we have a global footprint. We operate in 180 countries, 430,000 customers, approximately 100,000 employees. And we are the business process company. I mean, large part of SAP's success happened in the mid-90s when there was this business process re-engineering. I mean, now we talk about business process transformation, but a large part came from that tailwind of the client server and the business process re-engineering, and so that's it.
Good, and thank you for that, Abdul. I know you and I have known each other for a little bit, and what you did mention is that you've been back and forth with SAP.
Yeah.
You've done other things outside of SAP, and you're a big advisor, investor, participator in the startup economy. So thank you for that. Praniti, maybe I'll turn to you and maybe introduce yourself just for the audience.
Absolutely. I'm Praniti. I'm the CIO at Apttus. Not as large a company, but a pretty large force in Asia as well, if I may. And hopefully powers a lot of your companies in the middle office. Apttus is a quote-to-cash middle office business process optimizer. And so if you don't have it, you must get it. So that's what I would say. I've been at Apttus for 2.5 years, and I've worked in many different verticals. So I've worked in storage, I've worked in on-premise, insurance software, I've worked in med device. So I'm loving what I'm doing.
Great, thank you, Praniti. And Praniti and I share something in common. We're both aerospace aeronautical engineers by undergraduate and graduate training, so that's actually very interesting. You've been in the Silicon Valley for a number of years now.
23 years, yes.
Fantastic. Okay, Naveen, it's your chance.
Naveen Zutshi. I'm the CIO at Palo Alto Networks. For those who don't know Palo Alto Networks, we are a cybersecurity company. And really our mission in life is to make our customers safer each and every day. We do that through a combination of various products, whether those products are in the next-gen firewall space, or they're in endpoint space, or they're in the cloud space, or they're securing the future. So we talk about securing the enterprise, securing the future, and securing the cloud. We have around 68,000 customers. We have around 7,500 employees. We have been growing rapidly, and we've been really fortunate to have customers like you. So I've been with them for 4 years. I've been in the Valley for 20+ years. I've done a lot of different roles. I've been at Cisco, been at retail like Gap, been at startups running R&D. So really pleased to be here with you.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, excellent. Thanks for all those introductions. I thought we'd just get started. I thought we'd put in, before we jump into the matter, business process transformation is a pretty heavy loaded word. Everyone's got a different definition, means different things to different people. And I thought it might be valuable just spending a few minutes talking about what do we all mean by business process transformation. I certainly have a view, and my panelists have a view. I'd like to get a couple of views from the audience as well, so we can establish a baseline for a common terminology and syntax for that. And then we'll jump into what does it take to get it right. I want to talk a little bit about what are the technologies that are coming through and views from this panel on what's working, what's not, so we can get some good real life experience. And then we want to talk a little bit about what really makes it successful and what doesn't. So we'll navigate through this if anyone's interested in your participation as well. So I thought it'd be great to start with what is business process transformation, and I'm just going to turn to our panelists. I have a point of view as well that I'll insert in somewhere. And Abdul, if you want to start with that or give us a perspective, what is business? And you define SAP as a company that works on business processes, so you've already started that. But
yeah, so maybe one way to look at it, the way SAP went through. I mean, SAP started out as a process company, right? Which is where By the time ERP was coined, the category was formed, SAP was in business for 28 years and transforming business processes, right? What happens in manufacturing, that's where the whole business process re-engineering came in, right? Where you would go in and ask people, how are you running your manufacturing process? And here is the best practice or prescription for that process. But as technology came to the forefront, and you talked about digital transformation, companies started transforming themselves, and the same thing happened to SAP as well. And so I thought it's easier if I would walk you through SAP's own transformation, right? So if you take SAP, we were one business model company, so that business model changed. We were in the business model of selling perpetual license, and there is a maintenance associated with it, and that's how we grew. With the advent of the cloud, that changed, right? The model changed, where people now wanted subscription, and not only subscription, but also one-off, right? So now our business model, our company's process has to adapt to these three business models on the same base. And this is exactly what we went through, right? So today, we address three forms of businesses, right? One is the perpetual business. We still have 20 billion in revenue coming from the perpetual business. Then we have 5 billion coming in through the cloud and subscription business. And then we have one-off businesses, right? So this is, from our perspective, this transformation, every enterprise is going through that, right? I mean, you see technology companies like Nike, a physical goods company. John is now the CEO of Nike. He comes from a technology background, right? So every company is going through that, and that's how we define business transformation. And in order to cater to that, what is the processes that need to be addressed to help with that transformation? And that's how I would define that.
Okay.
I think you said that well. It's basically radically doing something which is going to enhance your business performance, right? So it's the changing of the business models. For us, for example, at Apttus, one of the things that we are doing is we're looking to figure out the right way to go in a high velocity route to market, right? Which is not something that Apttus has been doing in the past. We're doing direct sales, but we're not doing the high velocity route. And so to do that, there's a number of things and a number of processes that will have to shift or change. And it's extremely different because this is going to take 2 minutes online. And that's really going to require a significant amount of transformation underneath. So it's no longer sort of a lift and shift. We do have to do those incremental foundational work as well as part of that to set that foundation for the business transformation. But really, how do you impact the business? How do you impact the business performance? And that's really the key on how I look at transformation.
Yeah, so I think the stepwise change, which you mentioned, it's not the incremental change, it's the stepwise change. And so what causes the stepwise change? There are probably, for me, there are three main reasons for it. One is the whole business strategy or the business model that changed in the company. So, SAP, that was the case. In Palo Networks, we are a hardware and software company, but we are increasingly becoming a security services company. And so how do you make that change? The second is the external factors are changing. Both the technology is accelerating and changing quite rapidly, which is making you change the way you are going to adopt that technology and the way you're going to do business processes previously are no longer valid. Machine learning could be, RPA could be another. There are many examples like that, which is changing the underlying business process. And I think so that's the second leg to the change. And I think the third leg to change for us is growth of the company itself. So any company that grows at least doubles in size, every time you double in size, your existing business processes is no longer valid. You have to really redesign and rethink those business processes. So for companies of our size, which are growing rapidly, we have to rethink our business processes every time we double in size.
Thank you for all those comments. I'm going to probably add a few to what you said. I want to lay down a framework. At least we found it very successful, and I want to get some comments from the audience just to expand the definition, make sure we settle in it before we jump forward. So first of all, thank you for sharing that and the SAP journey itself. Look, I mean, I'm also going to make it a little controversial and kind of get some different things in play. The reality is most software companies today, the conversation has changed from we sell technology to we solve business problems, right? And a little bit of that is, I think the buying centers are evolving from the IT side of the house to the business side of the house. So in that world, I think it's fantastic to see how I think these companies and your company is shifting the value proposition and getting more on the line of business. And I think that itself, as you pointed out, is a business process transformation. And then yet, while you're doing that to yourself, you're going out and helping clients do it as well. And Praniti, I really love what you said about, what I got out of it is business process transformation may be the symptomatic end result, but really the objective is business model transformation. And I think that's so true. Look, we serve very large clients. We serve the largest aircraft manufacturer in the world, engine manufacturer in the world. We serve some of the largest banks in the world. We serve the largest retailers in the world. And some of the work we do is, in the airline industry, it's kind of, we start on business process transformation and, look at the supply chain of the parts for keeping an aircraft engine in the air. Some massive supply chain, as you can imagine. And getting that part right at the right place at the right time is a big part of keeping that engine running. You keep the engine running, you get obviously more revenues, you get better high return on the asset, because it's a very expensive asset. But what's happened in that industry as we've served that industry is we've seen a business model change, which has gone from how do I make the supply chain in aircraft engine spare part management much more efficient, effective, on time, in place. That's the old paradigm. To the new paradigm, which is the model is completely changed and aircraft engine manufacturers no longer sell aircraft engines. So buyers, people that used to buy aircraft engines don't buy aircraft engines anymore. They buy miles flown. And so so you think about it, that's a business model change. And for a manufacturer to play in that new business, they have to understand, which part is going to fail when. And because they have proprietary access to data to be able to manage that, they can use data science and AI to be able to predict that better. And if you predict that better, and obviously a better chance of putting the two screws and the bolt that was needed before the plane took off for Mumbai or something, so that when it lands there, if something does go wrong, as opposed to waiting for 3 days. And so that's the idea, and I think you sort of said that, but just to kind of bring that out as an example, the notion of how do you go after business model transformation, your example of SAP's sort of internal discussion as well is the same. How do you go after a business model transformation? And then to enable that, you have to fundamentally re-engineer, rethink, reimagine your business process to support that. So maybe I want to just add that to that perspective. My own view is, look, we do a lot of this work, and it sounds really interesting and kind of captivating. It's really hard work. You fall on enough times, you sort of get up enough times. So lots of lessons learned, I would say. I think what we've done is we've evolved a framework that is kind of simple: build, which is design, build, and run. And on the design side, we now, over the years, have learned to understand the role of journey mapping. We spend a lot of time on customer experience design, so journey mapping becomes very important. When we go to the technology, I want to come a little bit into process mining and digital twins, because it gives you granular information and understanding of the requirements, where the issues are. And then actually reimagining that future state and operating model around it. So a lot of work around the design part of it. Another part of the framework is actually the build, and the build is actually all the technologies, whether it's AI, particularly natural language, which is now very usable in the context of business process transformation, right? All the other extreme of, and I spoke with some people here around robotic process automation, process mining, some of the orchestration capabilities, and obviously AI and analytics that comes on top of that. And then what we didn't discuss in the sort of the wine and cheese thing that I was doing is actually the biggest thing that I find when we run these projects for clients is actually the third thing, which is how do you run it? And run is actually a whole other game, right? Because it requires an operating model change, it requires adoption, it requires an ongoing investment in keeping those models and AI up to date, and managing the drift that happens in the data and keeping that up to date. It's a big amount of work. And then on top of that, everything we're learning, particularly in the Valley here, around governance, around regulatory compliance as that evolves. So the run part of it is actually fairly complicated, as kind of quote unquote part of the word sexy as it sounds. Actually, the reality is it's very tough work within that. So I want to just lay that out because I want to come back and revisit the design side. I want to revisit the build side. I want to come back and talk a little bit about the run and the issues of governance, change management, adoption. before we sort of start moving too far off, I just want to open this up and invite some perspectives. What have you heard that you violently disagree with, and what have you found missing in sort of us putting a definition of business process transformation that you think needs to be added to that? I'll just look to you. Yes. And if you'll just introduce yourself before you.
I am Sanjay very great perspectives. One of the questions I have as you think about business process transformation, in the past it's been thought of as sort of episodic, whereas now with all the data, intelligence, it's perpetual and it's real time. How do you take that real timeness and now move it back into your own organizations and also at the customer level, because now you're able to do that?
Maybe I can start and you can add on to that, right? You're absolutely right? Which is, and then the pace at which it's growing is so fast. I mean, I'll give you here's a statistic that when we talk about digital disruption, right? So if you look at the world's GDP today, actually, if you look at it in 2018, it was 81 point something, right? Of which, if you split of how much of it is digital and how much of it is still the traditional way we used to do things and so on, the split is 68 to 13 trillion. So 81 trillion is the full number. 68 is non-digital and 13 is digital. In 2020, this is supposed to get to 88 trillion, of which the digital one will go from 13 trillion to 24 trillion. So in 2 years, you're going from 13 to 24 trillion. By 2022, that number will be 99 trillion, and the digital part of it will be 46 trillion. So if you now just imagine that that's the pace, and we are companies that are helping customers, you're absolutely right? Which is aircraft engines don't sell engines anymore. Similarly, Caterpillar, they don't sell machines anymore. They sell an outcome saying that, look, that area, we'll make sure that, so this is how we are helping customers go through that transformation, right? Which is, and when that transformation happens, it happens across their entire enterprise. Not only the customers that they serve, but the employees. Now, for a person who used to know everything about a Caterpillar machine, well, they're not relevant that much anymore. You need to be able to define an outcome. So the salesperson of that Caterpillar machine needs to know what drilling is required in order to fulfill the outcome that is being. So this is have we figured all of it out? I don't think so. But this is the journey that we are working with every one of our customers to understand what they're going through and then helping them through that.
I think that's right. I think, and I'll invite some other inputs as well. Look, I think that's right. And look, we do about 600, we'll have done about 600 and change digital transformation large corporations this year, as an example. And I'll tell you the number one thing we've learned collectively is that the job is never over. In other words, it is an ongoing, agile, continued working style. And so every time you come in and say it's a one-time fix, the minute you're done with the one-time fix, you're already obsolete, right? I'll give you an example. One of the things we do well, among other things, is we work for large banks and help them manage risk in their portfolio, in the lending portfolios. If you're a large bank, you have many portfolios. One of your portfolios will have, let's say, 5,000 companies that you've lent in the small, medium business space. And so you need to manage that lending portfolio and exchange of risk and so on and so forth. It used to be, and this is a great example of transformation. It used to be in the old world, in the main world, if you were a bank, you'd have to bring in a set of chartered accountants. They would have to bring in these 5,000 balance sheets from these 5,000 companies, and you'd sort of read through the pages, and you put essentially a financial score in each balance sheet. You'd aggregate it across the 5,000 different things. You'd come with a score for your overall portfolio, and then you'd manage your risk and your capital requirements associated with that accordingly, and then based on regulatory requirements and so forth. Today we do all of that with AI, right? So we have AI, and as we know in this room, we have natural language understanding at a level where it can perform, that it can extract all of that information. It can read the footnotes on page 19, and it can read those 2 sentences and convert it into a financial metric. Then you can aggregate all of that, on the flip of the switch. We do that across 17 languages, 4 different accounting standards. So it's a fundamental transformation And for the banks that are involved, it's night and day because you don't have to wait every 6 months to do this rebalance understanding. You can dynamically do it based on as a trade problem with China. Boom, you run the analysis, you can completely understand the new risk in the portfolio. Having said all of that, which is fantastic, amazing change in business model, banks are responsive, regulatory requirements are met really well, risk capital is reduced, and fundamentally more competitive, so massive amounts of benefit. The reality is those models change very quickly. The semantic expression of how a balance sheet and financial statements are put together evolve over time. And so this business process changes, the data model shifts, and then fundamentally how you manage risk in a competitive environment itself is advancing. And so this notion of one and done just doesn't exist. And so I would completely agree with you. Any other perspectives on that? Or?
I completely agree that it's not one and done, it's a continuous journey. However, I would say that you have to start somewhere. And I think it's really important to recognize that you've got to have a thoughtful start to something like this, right? So you're not going to magically one day come in and say, okay, I can have this continuous journey where I can churn and be that nimble really super fast. And so I think it's okay to be episodic in the beginning, lay out the foundations, and you can actually have the kind of data integrity that you need to be able to be that quick to respond.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's really, really important to know that it takes some time to get to that point where you can have that speed of response that you're looking for.
Praniti, I was going to take you somewhere else as well. I thought that's where you were going, but no, it was very good. And you and I were just talking briefly a little bit about private equity, looking at companies and looking to really get efficiencies in there. And you've done some work in that space. Anything from that world that you can add to this?
I mean, I think this is something that, we're a born in the cloud company. So with a software SaaS model from the very beginning, right? So we didn't have the level of transformation of the models that we're talking about in some of these. And I've been at those companies as well, Nimble and Align, etc. But when private equity came in, one of the things that we realized was they really started to push us to get to that nimbleness, to get to that speed. How can we get more responsive to our business? How do you help close happen faster? How do you, and then eventually with the goal of a different model to sell maybe, or with the goal of an acquisition that can be absorbed super quick, right? So some of these things are very important, and PE has really come in and driven that and said, let's get that episode started, right? Let's get it on the books, and let's roll it out instead of, 5 years that you may take to kind of go through procure pay, you may go through lead to cash, you may go through this. Let's kind of fast track that like a high intensity athlete, and let's do this in 2 years. And that's really sort of the journey that we have been on at Apttus for the last 1 year.
Good. Unless you had something specific, I'm just going to turn. Anything else? Otherwise, we'll move on to a different area. Something that you violently disagree with, or something you think we're missing as a team that you want to add to the definition of business process. Yes, sir.
So what do you think is...
Sir, before that, who you
I'm
are?
sorry, thank you, Naveen. I'm Paul Boreal from Earth Computing. Really great talks, thank you. I'm interested in what you think might be next, because there's all sorts of waves that come and go in the industry, and the hype of disillusionment and everything else. What is the next great thing in business model innovation? Or maybe I'll put it a different way. What are the big pain points in business model innovation that we can solve?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. I'll just give you a quick cut and then maybe invite other inputs, and then we'll move on to the next topic. But look, I'll probably have spoken with about, I'm guessing, but roughly accurate 50 boards this year, maybe 40, 45 boards this year, for all Fortune 500 companies. By the way, a little bit from a biased perspective, because we don't sell to startups, so there's a whole other segment of the economy where you're basically inventing the new. I'm talking about actually one of the large corporations that are trying to transform the business into the new, right? And here are 3 things that almost always come up in those discussions. Number one, I think there's a lot of opportunity for AI, but I don't understand how I can use it in my company. Number 2, digital transformation is an amazing opportunity, we're already doing it, but we need to reskill our workforce to be able to really take advantage of it, because technology by itself isn't going to deliver the business results that I want to see. And I think the more progress, particularly at the board level, I think digital ethics is now becoming a topic right? Most boards evolved 20 years ago to have an audit subcommittee and financial audits and risk audits. Now digital ethics is a conversation on the table. Some of that is regulatory related, but as exactly it's trying to understand bias, it's trying to understand intended use parameters, it's trying to understand just the notion of security, because no longer are we, and Naveen, you'll love this topic, we will no longer, the world of cybersecurity has changed from securing the app threat surface to actually securing the data threat surface, because you could have a fully functional app, but if you actually go in and change the data underneath it and the AI is running on the data, the end results will change. So I think those are three things that I hear consistently, and you guys obviously speak and see a lot more of this as well. Anything you want to add to the new?
I totally agree with the ethics aspect of it, right? Because, I mean, we hear a lot around AI. Again, yeah, we talk to today. That's the answer we get as well, right? We hear a lot about AI, but we don't know how to use it in the company. So, as for example, as a product company, what customers are expecting us to do is to embed that within an outcome, within a business model or within a product. But then the ethics aspect comes into play, where it has to be explainable. It has to be. It cannot be just some technology that's coming out of it, right? So those are two things that we consistently.
So I think, like if you, like at least my vision, if you think about. If you think about what you're dreaming of in future and what would the future look like, could the company run itself while the employees are at home? Could the company run itself and improve itself all the time? What does automation mean for the company, and how does it augment the human workforce in a manner where it is constantly enhancing world we live in? And I think we are phased away from that, but you can see that's where we get to. So I don't know when that will happen, right? And if you think about, we were talking about B2C versus B2B, B2C was in the forefront of machine learning and how they capture data to drive decisions. B2B is still catching up, and at the enterprise level, machine learning is much harder because the data set is much clunkier and not as clean, and then the problem spaces are much more, the attack surface for machine learning is much more widespread, but it's a huge opportunity for companies, right? So whether those are conversational bots, whether those are conversational AIs, where will natural language processing go next? Where will RPA, what will be the next incarnation of RPA, because it's really rule-based right now. So as an operator and a builder, so that's how I think, right? I'm not trying to sell you guys anything, right? I'm thinking in terms of what would we do as a customer, as an operator and builder. Those are the areas that excite me, and those are the areas that I think will be in the forefront in the next maybe 3 to 5 years.
The future of work is just such an important topic, and all of this that you just pointed out. I'll give a quick example, and then I'll take your question right after that. Because this topic comes up all the time, which is all of this digital and automation, is that an augmentation capability, is it a replacement capability, and what does the world of the future look like? I'll give you my perspective, and it's actually historical. 30 years ago, think about this, 5 people used to meet every last Friday of the month. They sit around a table, have donuts, drink coffee, and they talk some numbers. Turns out they were doing sales forecasting for the company they met. They each had one of the 5 geographies of the country, and they sort of sit down and figure out the forecast. 2 of the people sat in the room, they're great mathematicians. They could do arithmetic in the fly. The discussion was going on, people saying this and that and the other, they're kind of recomputing in their head. It was super valuable in that 5-person group because they weren't there. It would just take twice as long to figure out what the new forecast was going to be. These other 2 guys in the middle were sort of like just this pesky, it's a hassle. They're asking all these dumb questions. What if this happens? What if that happens? We got, rains in this, and it's like, why are we dealing with all this nonsense? Let's just get on with the work, right? And it was just, but we put up with them because they were 2 of our fellow sales leaders. They controlled 2 of the geographies. And this 5th guy over here, this 5th person, and she just kept quiet, just listened to everything. And then first one out of the door, basically did all of the things that was decided right up front, got it executed, always showed the best numbers, right? So this is the 5 group thing. They meet every month. Think about this, you can imagine this happening. I said 30 years ago because a few years into that, Microsoft Excel came out. And when Excel came out, you could recompute that number by changing one cell, and the entire Excel would recompute, right? So now what happens to that 5% mix? Two guys that were doing all the mathematics in the group, not that important anymore. I mean, nice to get the perspective, so they had very different cloud. These two other pesky people that were always asking these idiotic questions that was really just a hassle to deal with, all of a sudden, judgment becomes very important because they're forcing the what ifs, they're thinking through the alternatives, they're bringing risk parameters into the equation. And then this one other person that was just quietly listening, really not contributing that much, but taking all of the best ideas and implementing it right away, action, her value just went up, right? So the idea is that as automation, as AI rolls through, prediction becomes cheaper and prediction becomes higher quality. And that's how we think AI plays, at least I think how AI is going to play out. But prediction is one part of the larger equation. You have to be able to predict something, and you have to make a judgment on whether you do something with the prediction or not, and what you do with it, and then you need to be able to execute on it or action it. And judgment is fundamentally a human in the loop sort of a decision-making process, and actioning obviously comes back to that. And so, one of the ways I think we think about it is, if you think about the role of AI and kind of this future of work and so on and so forth, we think about it as an augmentation technology, not necessarily as a replacement technology. And it's one of many perspectives in the industry, but I'll share that with you because I think it's relevant. You had a question, we'll take that, and I want to change
Well,
it.
I had a comment about one of the, you mentioned if we missed anything in the business transformation process. I thought that business transformation process, by the way, my name is Cyrus Nee, the founder of a local software startup. Business process transformation, I think, has to kind of be forced, unfortunately. It's very rare for companies to come and say, I'm going to transform my business. In fact, it's very risky. And so I think a lot depends on human interaction that forces that change. So in the 1970s and 80s, it was personal computers that forced this business transformation in 1990s, and to date, and going forward probably, definitely the internet. In fact, you mentioned you have to change your business model because of the internet, go to cloud. And also, to answer your question, I think the next change that will change human interaction, that will force a lot of transformation, is going to be autonomous vehicles. I think that's going to change logistics, and that would, in effect, change a lot of business processes.
Excellent. Okay, I think it's very relevant. Okay, folks, I'm going to try and change this a little bit. I think this group might find it somewhat more exciting because we are, after all, in the Silicon Valley. So I think to drive business process transformation, before we get into how we do it, there's a whole landscape of technology choices to be made. I mean, starting with existing system of records and all of the options around that, to new systems of intelligence engagement. And there the spectrum goes from process mining to process orchestration technologies. Yeah, we talk about quote to cash, did you say? So middle office capabilities, we talk about robotic process automations, it's sort of morphing into this thing called intelligent process automation, there's AI, and there's NLP. I mean, it's like difficult to keep up with this kind of alphabet soup that's going on over here. Having said that, I thought it's a wonderful opportunity to just hear from the panel and eventually the team here on what's really working, like beyond all this hype, like what are 1, 2, 3 things? I mean, you guys have implemented stuff and you've tried a whole bunch of things. What's really working? Where's the bang for the buck? What gives you returns right away? So maybe I open up a discussion a little bit on the technology landscape.
So I think RPA works. I was a huge skeptic of the technology 3 years ago. Because I thought it was really rule-based, and a company that is moving really fast and changing the rules all the time, it's going to be very difficult to implement. But on the order-to-cash side, it has worked for us. We have quite a few bots running, and it has augmented and helped our teams. We use process mining as well, and it has uncovered data-driven approaches to solving existing problems, whether it is end-to-end order automation, whether it's end-to-end bookings automation. We are well on our way to achieving that. Still not completely there, but we have made quite a bit of progress over the last 12 to 18 months. And it is something that was interesting for me was because it's so bite-sized, it is democratizing IT development with business. Because business themselves can get their arms around this development. They can understand what it takes to do something like that. and they see immediate value and benefit for their teams as a result of this change. So whether you look at UiPath or Automation Anywhere, they are up into the right in terms of their growth as a result. So that is definitely working. I think machine learning in an enterprise setting, especially for many companies, is still an experiment stage rather than a fully embraced stage. I think in areas like NLP, it is working. We are doing it for case deflection as an example. We use NLP for case deflection for our customer support accounts. But it's still very early innings in terms of what it can achieve. And we have had a lot of missteps actually. We have had a lot of failures along the way. And I'm happy to talk about those as well, because what you end up having is a probabilistic model, and many of the leaders think deterministic. So as an example, if you want to do a bookings forecast, you are thinking in terms of less than 0.5 error rate in your booking forecast. Well, none of your NLP algorithms are going to give you that kind of efficiency. They will probably give you 2.5% or something. And for a data scientist, 2.5% is great. For a business leader, 2.5% is basically missing the quarter. There's no way I can agree to that. So not only is it a judgment issue, it's an issue of credibility for the bookings forecast. And the other example I will give you is we did a lot of work around next best product. So what is the next best product we would sell to a customer? And we did Markov models, we did a lot of different NLP engines around it. Explaining that to a salesperson as to how that model derived that product recommendation is next to impossible, because we are looking at 10,000 plus features. So how do you explain that? It's not an Excel spreadsheet, it's a 10,000 model view.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the challenges that companies face, is how do you make it then accessible? And then the salespeople find it credible, otherwise they will just ignore it and just continue doing the way they were doing it before.
So Naveen, let me just see if I can just quickly summarize. I think we made 4 brilliant points, and maybe we can add as a team to that. So I think you said that, look, RPA works because it's bite-sized and it's a quick gateway to getting started quickly. I think it's one of the things you said. I think you said the nature of low-code, no-code is that it's particularly attractive for business executives and business teams to be able to just get started, so it's a fast ramp-up. I think you said that in machine learning, expectation is one of the largest issues to manage, because people end up having misset expectations around prediction accuracy and other things. And then you talk about explainability, and AI is an important component of adoption rate, which is a big deterrent in enterprise deployment. So I think we got those 4 things on the table. What would you add?
He's covered them all. He did. I think RPA is definitely an advantage, and I do believe that there are many people that were slow to sort of adopt, and probably would have benefited, including myself, by the way, probably would have benefited in adopting a little bit faster. Many small different areas that you really can't sort of hit unless you go into the RPA mode, right? So they're just smaller processes that you know that you don't have the best breed systems for.
Just to add to that, now there are startups that are doing no-code or no-code development that they are targeting the businesses, which is actually a very interesting phenomenon too. Yeah. So
there's a worry that comes, sorry, go ahead.
One thing I would add is, at least in our world, the whole conversational AI is a great concept, but the intent, right? So for example, to understand the intent, to model those intent, it is still not comprehensive enough, where we are not able to really capture that yet. What really works well is, like you mentioned the 3 things, right? Which is you need to capture something, which is the listening part, so process mining works very well. The understand or judgment part sort of works, and the act part outside of explainability, it's mostly rule-based, those things work, but the explainability doesn't work yet. Yeah. That's our perspective so far.
I'm going to throw in a couple of other perspectives, a couple of contrarian, just to actually get the discussion a little bit more back and forth, and then maybe a couple of things we've learned, by the way, through making lots of mistakes, that might be valuable as we think about explainability as a criteria. And we'll come to this knowledge graph idea as well. I think on RPA, look, in my mind, the jury's still out. Okay, obviously the industry's gone through a massive up, a massive down, and a massive up. We serve only Fortune 500 clients, so I can't speak for the larger industry. Largest banks in the world, largest consumer goods companies in the world. I think that there was a lot of hype on lots of things that got bought that are sitting on shelf, and there's a lot of disillusionment that came in. And I think many of the companies I talked to are actually going on the round 2 of RPA. By the way, I think round 2 of RPA is set up to be much more successful because it isn't kind of this wild, will solve every single thing in the world kind of an approach. It's much more targeted, it's much more pointed. And discovering the right places to apply RPA is actually more important than applying RPA itself. So I just want to balance, maybe I'm just going to push back a little bit because I want to get more thoughts on it. Clearly we do a lot of RPA implementations day in, day out, one of the largest drivers and users of RPA in the world. But it's not the panacea that it's often marketed to be, and I think we want to be thoughtful about that in terms of real world, real life deployments because I've seen many large enterprise clients run into trouble with that. I will say one thing we've learned on explainability, Abdul, that has actually benefited us, and I share that in the interest of the community. I mean, AI is fundamentally a black box. I mean, that's the nature of the game. It's just the way it's designed. But if you implement AI in the context of breadcrumbs that allow you to track back, so what you're really doing is, I'll present a next best action and you said next best product, same idea, which is essentially using a set of data to be able to predict what's the next question that's going to come up.
We have those two, like NPA for sales reps and NPD for...
Right. But fundamentally it's the same idea, right? It's basically looking at, patterns and machine learned information to be able to kind of make the next recommendation. And the idea there is, what we realized over time is, if I can allow you to click and then actually see, so I give you a financial score. I'll score something for you and you say, oh yeah, this doesn't look right. It's like, great, click on it. Click on it. It shows you the actual by separate balance sheets with the numbers are. So the 17th one, that's the one that's an outlier, and by that, click on that. Then you go to the actual balance sheet, see start with the numbers. The 19th number on that cell doesn't look right. It's too high, too low, doesn't make sense to me. You click on it. It actually shows you the 2 sentences that we derived that information from, right? Now think of the real world. The real world, what would happen? You get a score that you didn't believe in. You walk over to Sally over there 3 aisles down. You say, Sally, what's going on? And Sally say, well, did you see what they said in the statement? And this is what it means. And it's like, okay. It's not like Sally's actually explaining how she converted the CEO statement on the future into a score. That's still the intellectual thinking that went in. It's her opinion. And so what we've learned over the years now is that if we can breadcrumb it back through the decision process to a discrete piece of data that led you to the endpoint, we've been able to get through this explainability problem. And I just share that because we struggle with them a lot as we do a lot of AI deployments for customers. It's been a big issue of that. I had one other thought, but I think I've lost it now.
I do have a question though. I think you talked a little bit about how your large enterprise clients, sorry, I'm just turning the tables a little bit.
Yeah, of course. Please do.
Right.
Yes.
As your large enterprise clients are getting into trouble with, the proliferation or not thinking through where they want to apply it, etc. How much of that is related to governance or the lack of governance tools?
Yeah.
I'd really like to understand that because I feel like that's going to be the next wave is how do you govern?
It's a fantastic point, Praniti. I'll tell you that the 2 biggest issues, and you're talking about RPA right now, right? So the 2 biggest issues in RPA deployment are at the front end and the back. The front end issue is discovery, which is, I take a quote to cash process, there's like 650 things going on. What are the 10 things I want to apply RPA to? That decision is a super important decision to make, and it requires a deep understanding of the process and the nuances of the process to be able to make that call. And process mining helps there because it gives you a quantitative way to make the decision, but it's still a very involved process. And I think that solves for half of the problems that I see. The other half is exactly what you said. I'll give you a real life example, and please, don't take it in the context of what we do, but we all go through these, and this is a small community of peer groups. We're a situation where we had, we've roboticized so many different things. A set of software robots that were working on order management for a client stopped working. They stopped working because someone in the client IT administration changed the password for some CRM system somewhere in Europe, Germany, whatever. And we sort of sat there and said, hey, here we go, Germany on vacation again. No pun intended, no joke intended, but it's like we all said. And we said it's actually February. Europe's not on vacation. They're like live and humming. Why are we not seeing the orders? And it turns out you go look at it, there's some IT alert somewhere saying job number 96,932 has failed, right? But there was no business user visualization of that problem to the level that someone could jump on it and solve it. You walk into a room like this, and let's say half of you didn't show up. This side of the room was completely empty, this side of the room was fully filled. People tell right away, because we're used to working with people.
I think that's just because RPA monitoring is right now still immature.
It's completely immature. It's not there. It doesn't exist.
Most of these tools don't have a really good.
That's why we have centralized all our
Yeah, you don't allow any decentralized work.
Because right now the monitoring or management of it is very immature. There are no companies that are doing a good job of it. And that is going to come there, but it's not there right now.
And I think, Naveen, what you're maybe also suggesting is it isn't just the IT monitoring of the RPA tools, it's actually the business unit process. That's right.
The auto volumes or whatever the numbers are, right?
And the reason I was bringing that up, and I think it's very important, is that low code, no code is something that we talk about a lot as saying, okay, this is such a huge advantage, we can give it to our business users, but we have to be very sort of, and I'm all about enabling our business users. And so I say that with a little bit of caution there, but that we need to be cautious about how we roll this out. We need to be cautious about the fact that when they actually, when a business team, a sales ops team is going and converting some automation, that they're thinking about their downstream impacts into revenue, right? So we've got to really, and this is really where governance, where a strategy around how do you want to roll something like this out comes into play. And we don't have the tools right now for AA or UiPath to do that well.
Okay, so I want to come back to this topic of outside of technology, what's required to really make business process transformation successful when it comes to governance. Before I do that, anything else on technology that?
Not necessarily technology, but we've talked a lot about technology. I think we touched on people in terms of thinking about business process transformation as people process transformation. I used to work at a company that unsuccessfully tried to move to the cloud, and it was not necessarily a technology problem, it was a people problem, both from internally as well as from the customer perspective. So as you think about all the great stuff you're doing from a technical perspective, from a provider of the technology, you've got to make a fundamental shift of the stakeholders and priorities, and then from a user perspective, that shift has to happen as well. So how do you make the people process transformation happen?
Yeah, it's a great point. I do want to take that, and I want to come to because I want to spend some time on people, but anything else in tech? Yes.
Hey, I'm Natalie, work for Palo Alto Networks, actually in Naveen's art. So my question is, transformation obviously is a journey, and whether it is RPA moving to intelligent document processing to ML or chatbots, but it is a very staged process. And it has to go hand in hand with your process transformation as well. I'd like to hear comments in terms of what you have seen as challenges in your organizations or in your companies and how you have overcome that.
I'll give you my quick reaction. Let's get at this. Look, I think here's the number one thing, and you said it perfectly, which is it's a journey. Transformation is a journey, it's not a destination. Here's life in my work. January 1, I'll show up at a large bank CIO, global CIO, and there's going to be this mad dash to get 1,800 software robots, RPA agents up and running. The whole discussion is how many people can show up in Stockholm next Monday, and we gotta get this out, we gotta get this out, we gotta get this out, right? You sort of huff and puff and somehow get through all of this heavy-duty work to get these 800 software robots up and running, and then you show up 6 months later saying, hey, what do you think? We did a great job, right? Not. And the discussion changes to, well, actually it's interesting, now there's all this data that we never really had. So what are you guys like sitting around asking about how the RPA go? Why aren't you running machine learning on it? And I'm exaggerating a little bit. So we can figure out some patterns in it, right? So then we're off running, trying to do some track tesseract and apply this and that and figure out some machine learning things. And lo and behold, there's pattern in the data for sure. So you come back and say, well, you know what? Bob, great news, like we finally figured this out, here's some pattern. And then the discussion becomes, well, if we know that, you know the questions that are being asked, you know the answers that are going to come up. Why don't we have a conversational chatbot that kind of front ends that and takes these questions off the queue before our SMEs, subject matter experts, have to take them themselves. And it's a very interesting story because what ends up happening is we're working with some small software startup on this RPA, and then suddenly we're working with a Google on this other thing. And then we're coming out and trying to deploy Lex and Poly and trying to hodgepodge it together. And over this journey, the APIs, the investment thesis and how it goes forward, the roadmap keeps changing, right? And so one of the biggest things I think we've learned is how do you think about transformation as a journey, not as a destination? How do you actually lay out a roadmap for the components you will eventually need? And then how do you preserve the investments in the small things you do today, into the bigger things you do tomorrow, into the biggest things you do after that? And I think if you don't plan ahead for that, you'll end up doing lots of something here, something here, something here, all look good for the moment, but they're not going to tie together the right way. So that'd be my number one learning.
No, I mean, and I think I want to address the question that he had around change management. I think
That's the hardest part. The technology part, we can figure it out, but to enforce that change, to go through that, to shift the mindset of the way you are doing things to the new way of doing things, that has been the hardest part, at least in our transformation. If you take a simple sales process at SAP, if you look at the world we come from, perpetual license, these are big deals that take sometimes months and years to formulate, and then once you have that deal, that's how a salesperson operates, right? I mean, these are 8-figure deals or 9-figure deals in some cases. In the new world, that's not the case. These are much smaller deals, much higher volume, so you have to think of it in a very different context, and some people adapt to that, and some people don't. And that's the biggest lesson that we have learned along this journey, that the change management is the most hardest and most, difficult.
Yeah, I think, business process transformation journey is a lot of paved with a lot of difficulties, as an example. So I was at Gap, and then if you think about what are retailers doing, and we were part of this team which was building this omni-channel strategy for the company, right? And so on one set of metrics, if you look at success around pooling the inventory across online and stores, reserve in store, ship from store, those kinds of virtual storerooms, SD-WAN technology, customer Wi-Fi, you think about all the technology that we enable, you think like you did great, like you had all these things. But if you take a step back and think about what was that meant for, ultimately the business model change was meant to increase the underlying sales. And so if the product itself is not strong enough, you can do all sorts of digital transformation, it's not going to change your underlying sales. It may, so that is, like the lesson learned for me was like, we felt really good being part of the journey where we were doing POS transformation. We were actually migrating POS to the cloud. Like, that's a hard amount of work, but then we did it, like, felt really good about it. But at the same time, does that really move the needle? So I think a lesson for me was really tie business process transformation to success metrics at the company level. And make sure that along the way you're measuring that is it moving the needle for the company. And if it's not, you need to cut your losses and move on to something else. So.
And there is always resistance, and I think there's always resistance, but you've got to build a team, and you've got to build a team around you of people that understand the business, that can challenge the status quo, because I think this is one of the hardest parts, is to really show the art of possible is our job, right, to our business partners. And if we cannot show the art of possible, we're not sitting there and showing them how they can shift that process to something more optimized. And I think that's the other question I think you may have asked, but so I'm trying to touch on that.
So we're in the last leg of our discussion here. I think that's a perfect way to start this last bit, which is outside of technology, what really makes a business process transformation successful? And I think the 2 points you guys laid out already, the notion of going for a higher goal and staying committed to that true north and measuring it iteratively or frequently, I think is a great idea. I think, so I want to pick up on that. But let's talk a little bit about what are our learnings for how to make business process transformation successful. Technology will eventually get right. Change management is a big issue. What else? How do you approach it?
I think having CEO and his staff walk in and having them be committed to the transformation is very important.
I hear you. No, I think. Can't hear it.
He's saying senior executives,
I think in the top down.
Fair enough.
No, what I was saying is having the CEO and the exec staff completely bought in. You need to have complete buy-in from the CEO.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it generally doesn't work. And you need to utilize your CEO to remove blockers also sometimes. So, for example, you'll be in a peer and you're trying to influence, that works to an extent, but sometimes you have to accelerate things and escalate. So I'm learning that muscle, but that's an area which you have to constantly work on. Is really, you want to move fast, and the way to move fast is you want to drive changes you want to drive decisions in a very fast manner.
Or you can get bought by a PE, and that will work.
I was going to say,
They have a model and just.
actually, I was going to pick up something you said earlier. I lost my train of thought earlier. I think it was a fantastic point you made, which is the role of a CIO, a technologist, a business leader these days is as much creating a vision for the new operating model, right? And so talk to us a little bit more about, can you give us some examples where you've seen that play really well? Like, how can we take that insight and translate it into something?
So, one of the things that I love to chat about is I'm re-implementing our own product, Apttus and Apttus. I'm in the middle of that re-implementation, and the idea was, we're going to have our PS team come in, because it's our own product, they're going to quickly get it in, and we're going to be off the gates, right? But that was not my vision. And so we kind of stalled it a little bit. We talked a little bit about, well, are we going to go with the same discounting thresholds? Because it's been all over the place, right? Are we going to normalize this? Are we going to look at our SKUs? Shall we look at our packages? Are we selling the right packages, right? And that's one instance where we decided not to even touch the tech till we did some analysis, data-driven, very factual, attach rates, what makes sense to go with what, redesign your packages, put a different list price, do some price analysis, bring it in, and this was not something that everybody was looking forward to because it was going to take about 3 months. What we really wanted was a CPQ in the market, which was fresh and best-in-class implemented, right? And it was really not something that I felt would actually add the value to the company, because you're really doing a lift and shift. You're taking your existing processes, it may take 8 days, you're going to the DRB, you're getting a review done, you're bringing it back. I mean, there's just levels of approvals, and all you're doing is just automating that. And so actually that was a significant add, which we did to our project timeline, but very successful in many ways because it actually made it go faster at the end of it, because you're not reevaluating every decision through that project then.
I love that perspective, because I think going for that higher goal is probably one of the best things that we want to reflect on as we do business process transformation. I'll tell you a quick story of a client in the pharmaceutical industry. We serve many, but there's one chief information officer. We started a discussion which was all around, if in the pharmaceutical business, by the way, there's regulations that require you to do certain things. For instance, if I had a headache and I had my medicine and I had something else and I happened to report it tomorrow morning to the blood donation center receptionist, technically, if he or she enters it in the system, that's called an adverse event. And pharmaceutical companies are required to report on that and comply with regulatory laws across the world, which are all very different, so that they can report on these sorts of things that are happening over there. And so if you think about business process transformation of that world, it's a crazy world, because People are getting more chatty, we're trying all these different medicines, all these different reactions going on, regulations are changing fast, and they're different for most different countries in the world. It's a very complex environment. And so the traditional ways of dealing it with the traditional business process doesn't make sense, so we're going to apply AI and deep analytics to be able to transform that. But the point I want to make is this. What started as a project to sort of say, how do I comply with my regulatory environments? Now, by the way, in the pharmaceutical industry, it's not as simple as that. It's a really big fine if you don't get it right. So it's very high on the list of everyone. But the bigger win there was the larger goal, which is how do I use this instantaneous data feed that is coming back from these Facebook Messenger things that people are talking to their cousins and so on and so forth about, to be able to spot trends in drug safety and be able to respond to it much faster. And so it's just an example of what started as a business process transformation of we got a bulky process that's growing really fast, we got to crunch our costs down, we need to sort of make it more efficient. Actually, the bigger goal and the larger win on that was actually building a public data safety program that allows you to react quickly, because now you have all this data flowing through in a very in real time. And so I guess the point I would make is that I think this reinforces what you were saying, which is go for the higher goal. And I think a little bit of our goal is to actually paint the vision for what that alternative view looks like, for that future state looks like, to then be able to get the support, and as you said, the executive team behind it. Would you add to that?
Yeah, one thing I would add is, again, any transformation, like somebody said, is a journey, and we always underestimate the time it takes or the patience. Right? If I were to just apply it to SAP, we started out on this journey in 2010, and the higher goal was to say that okay, we are shifting our business model. So let's take a goal, right? The revenue from the new business model needs to cross over higher than the revenue from the old business model, and it only crossed over last year. So it took 8 years for that.
Several acquisitions.
Right. So there is not a one path that fits, right? Like it's not a one and done. So it takes a lot of patience, be at it, and have that buy-in, and I think that we underestimate that a lot.
There are a few more minutes left. What would you add to that?
Just to expand on that, how do you manage your investors, particularly the larger companies, where they've got Wall Street to answer to, and if you've got a J-curve that takes 8 years, they may not like that and thus impact your ability to really transform.
Yeah, it's easier to now look at it looking backwards, because when we started the journey, SAP only played in 2 markets, and it was a $40 billion market cap company. Today, it's a $165 billion market cap company, so it's easy to justify that. But along the journey, it was important to set smaller milestones, right? So first we said that we would look at more around the usage and so on, right? So as you go along that journey, you set these concrete milestones and show that there is a progress towards it. And the way we set it was in 5-year increments. So we set an increment for 2015, and then another one, and then we broke it down further down. That's the only way to measure that and take corrective actions if we have not met any of those. Right? That's the way we do that.
I don't want to comment on any one specific company, but I think this is a big, you've hit the nail on the head. This is a really large issue for most large clients, look at companies trying to go through this. I'll tell you, the conviction piece is a really important piece, because there's going to be lots of feedback from the shareholder base and reduced appetite for all these changes that are coming down the way. So having the internal conviction is the starting point, because if that's not the case, it'll break very quickly. I think very clear communication, particularly with the shareholder base and then with the employee base. Actually, customers get there much faster because they can see it right away. It's the shareholder base, because the clients, the investors expect you to have a return profile like this, and you're now getting to a business that has a return profile like this. And having that connection made is a really important point. And the employees, because employees have to feel like it's part of the journey they want to be on, and that they're going to be relevant in the new world, and actually painting that vision for them is really important. And then, as you said, small successes and consistency, because the trust, I mean, I hate to say it this way, the trust level is as far as last quarter, right?
Exactly.
So I think being able to demonstrate that is a really important part.
No, I think you nailed it. It's really important to have that level of strong conviction on the long run, but at the same time, you have to provide ample communication in the short run. And you're going to still get the lumps along the way, but you just have to have committed to your strategy, that your strategy is sound and that strategy is the right strategy.
One thing we learned in that is the narrative that you give to the external has to be almost the same as the internal. And,
Right.
and the moment there is a blip in that narrative, then you've lost it, right? But that's something that there was a question back there.
Yeah, great panel. Thank you for your time today. My name is Mike Moreno. I work at a company up in San Francisco. My question, probably more for the CIOs here, is you're talking about this digital transformation journey. Are vendors who approach you guys coming with that story where we're going to roll something out over time, or are they still pitching you from the perspective of, I have a product that solves this goal in this time?
It's generally the latter. Depends on the company, right? If it's a service integrator like Genpact, they will probably share with you the bigger vision. If it's a product company, they will sell you the product. So it really depends on the company that is coming to talk to you. I don't know. Yeah.
No, I completely agree. It is the latter for product companies especially. But I think one of the things that you're starting to see with vendors as they're approaching you is that it's not just anymore just about the product. A lot of good product companies are starting to say, let me tell you what you need to do before you put my product in. And I think that's a really good play, and that's really more and more where product companies need to go, whether it is best practices, how should you redefine your process, help you with some process reengineering, so that their product, as it comes in, can actually solve that problem that we have, which most of the times you will notice that it doesn't if you don't do that pre-work. So.
My name is Alex Bradsky. Does it work? Yes. AV Systems Digital Transformation. I have a question for you guys. How do you manage risk? How do you deal with especially the CIOs saying, oh, this is all great, but prove it, it's going to work for me, I'm not going to get screwed up and then get hit?
Well, I think you gotta demonstrate execution through incremental execution, and you gotta be able to make the hard decisions if projects are going south, that you're going to change course. You got to be able to demonstrate that. The other thing that I would say is business will forgive you for delaying a project. Business will never forgive you for putting a project in which is poor quality. So, I think you have to think about that as you are designing your business process transformation as well.
I just by the seat of my pants. I mean, that's my answer. No, on a regular basis, I think you have to love adrenaline if you're doing this role, and it's, as Naveen mentioned, there is definitely constant risk assessment. There's good judgments that you have to make. There are, bad learnings that occur that you learn from over and over again. But essentially, you're managing it minute by minute, every day, with the decisions that are coming up.
And I think, this is some just copying some, Jeff Bezos said this around decision making. There are some decisions that you can be wrong on, and that's fine, but there are other decisions you don't want to be wrong on. And then your worth as a leader improves as to how many right decisions you have made on decisions that you don't want to be wrong on. So I think that's where judgment comes in, that's where experience comes in, that's where working with others and making sure that you're making the right decisions comes in. So we all learn from that process.
Exactly.
I think maybe I just add a couple of things just watching this on the side. I think there's a set of risks that I think are the first category risks, and then there's a big risk after that. The first set of risks I think the industry's figured out. So Look, there's an idea risk component, and the idea risk is all about fast fail, agile. So if you come with the wrong idea, you can get out of it fast. I think that's the way to solve for that. There's financial risk, and I think increasingly with SaaS and other kind of shared economic model, I think there's ways to kind of mitigate that risk. There's technology risk, including cyber and security and other risks that obviously there's a whole bunch of frameworks that are in place. So the first category of risks, I think the industry more or less has kind of developed some best practices on. Look, I'll tell you the one that really pops up all the time, which is kind of the risk of an integrated approach to business process transformation. And what I mean by that is, it's easy to digitize, it's difficult to transform. Digitizing is about bringing a bunch of technologies. I can do that any day. I want to do it very successfully. Transforming isn't about technologies only. It's about getting a shared vision, getting commitment to the vision, driving the change management, getting the adoption in place, and integrating the operating model, the process changes, and then the technology things into one combined whole. And if I look back across the industry, I think a lot of projects don't do well because they don't manage that risk well. And that's just as simple as, digitization has become a kind of big fancy word, but digitization is a tool, transformation is the outcome. And so focusing on that is a big one. Anything else you'd add?
No, I think we covered it all. I mean, one thing that we did is spend a lot of time upfront on really simulating what we are up to. You mentioned it, design, I guess, right? That this is how it would look like. And then once you identify the risks, then there are various ways of mitigating those. But we spent a lot of time upfront making sure that's the path that you want to head on, because it is a decision that we cannot, that business would not forgive us for.
We're on a dot on the hour. I think you guys have been very generous with your time and your comments.
We have one more question.
Really.
Oh, sorry.
Hopefully not mine. I think we've been talking about, again, between digitization and transformation, obviously the process excellence, the prep work, getting it right is important before you move on to implement technology. I'm curious on how have you operationalized it, as in who's owning the process excellence? Is it IT or is it business, or do you have dedicated groups who perform this? And it can be very specific to each company, but very curious about that.
So in the recent journey that we just went through, IT actually drove and facilitated along with all of the business team members, right? So you cannot do something like changing product packaging without product marketing, without marketing in there, without sales in there, etc. But I do think that just given the fact that, and this has been said over and over again, you look on the upstream, you're looking at your own functions, you're looking at all the downstream functions, you have that perfect vantage point of driving that change, understanding when revenue is going to do something when they are implementing for 606, how it's going to impact another team, and helping to ensure that those problems don't come about, right? And so I really do believe that this should be more and more CIOs are becoming business leaders. They understand the business. I mean, and on top of that, understand the technology, right? So I feel like this is definitely something I firmly believe should come more and more on the CIO side. It's a very firm opinion there, sorry. Anyway,
Good, I think
that's a great answer.
Speakers, we are grateful to you for coming tonight during a holiday kind of week, and wish you all a very kind of happy holiday. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.